Hey, everyone. Welcome back. We're starting another episode of So You're Ready to Date. And today we have Meghan and Christina here with us. And we're going to dive into a topic that you have all wanted to hear a little bit more about, and that is dating after a loss. And so we thought Meghan and Christina could come on and share their experiences and maybe talk about what they went through as they got back into the dating scene after their experiences. And so we hope you'll hang out and stick with us through the episode. And at the end, we'll tell you where you can find more of them and more of their information. So again, welcome, guys. We're super excited to have you today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So if you just kind of want to start with maybe a little background as to a little bit of your story, however much you feel comfortable sharing.
Sure. Christina, do you want to go first?
I can. So I met my husband. We were childhood sweethearts and we reconnected as adults. We were married for 22 years and he died unexpectedly, totally had no clue that he had heart disease. And I came home and found him gone. And I was 45 years old. So that was 3.5 years ago. And so that's a little bit of my background of how I landed here. So Meghan?
Similar story. We weren't together for quite as long, but I met my husband, Jason, online. We were together for 4 years and it was the same thing. It just unexpectedly died from heart disease. We had no idea. He just collapsed in the bedroom and he was gone. So that was almost 5 years ago. And now, since we're talking about dating, I was ready to date after that, or I was ready to get back to life and stuff. It was like probably 2 years, maybe 1.5 to 2 years after he died. I was starting to think, okay, I'm on my feet. I'm happy with where I am, who I am as a person, and I was ready to date. And then the whole world shut down because the pandemic happened. So it took, a little longer, I guess, but I've been with my current boyfriend for 2.5 years now. So
Meghan, how did you know you were ready? I mean, you kind of briefly said you've kind of felt like your heads are poop in a group, for lack of a better way to say it. But how did you know you're like, I think I'm ready for that next step? Or did you maybe, because we thought, maybe do you start dating, you realize, hey, I'm not quite ready for this? Or do you know that there's definitely, you're waiting for some particular moment, sign, feeling that you're like, yep, this means I'm ready?
Yeah, so there's not like, any one clear indicator, but there were 2 things that I knew for sure. One, that I needed to be able to withstand or handle a breakup or my heart getting broken. And I was so fragile for so long that I knew that I couldn't handle the worst parts of dating. So I just didn't do it. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is I needed to be 100% happy in my life where I was doing my own thing without anybody else. So I needed that foundation of healing and moving forward, dealing with all the grief, dealing with all of the emotions and everything, and kind of trudging through it and coming out on the other side to know that I was emotionally ready to have somebody in my life again.
Definitely the same. I immediately went into counseling after my husband died and am still in counseling 3.5 years later. I wanted to make sure that I was healthy before I started to go into a new relationship. And I felt like I was in a really good place. I had seen somebody a few months before my husband died, a speaker, and she said, basically it's like, she put it, I don't know what the rating of your show is, but it was just that whole thing of like, deal with your baggage, we'll say baggage. So other people don't have to wade through your baggage to get to you. And that's really where I was. I wanted to make sure that I had dealt with stuff so that I wasn't coming into a relationship. I wanted, and somebody else was dealing with the aftermath of what I had gone through. So that's where I was when I started dating. So I started dating about a year and a few months after my husband passed. And I'm not I mean, I am currently dating, but not that person. So that's where I'm at.
And there's no like timeline that, it's like, okay, right at a year, you should be ready to date. That's not really it. It's more like a feeling, like you said before. It's like you have to know that you can handle it and that you're ready to do it.
So once you guys went out and put your toe into dating, and I know, Megan, you said it's kind of when the world shut down, so it does sound like maybe you had to take a little bit of a step back. Did you guys continue down that path, or was there any point when you had felt like you were ready and then decided that maybe you weren't as ready as you felt like and decided to take a step back and evaluate anything? Or was it kind of once you put yourself out there, you've just been able to go?
I think that there is so much pressure in society to be coupled up, to be with somebody, to not be single, to get over it, get through it, stop being so sad all the time, that you're kind of at a point, you're kind of constantly thinking, am I ready? Is it time? Should I be doing this? Am I doing something wrong? Am I missing something? So I think that I had a lot of back and forth internally, like determining whether or not I was ready, and it's like, okay, well, this seems fun, but no, I don't want to do that. So I did have kind of some like back and forth a little bit before I knew that I was definitely ready. But I think that's just like societal pressure kind of pressuring you to be a couple. It's hard to be single in society, single and happy and,
For me, having been married for so many years, I think for many years, I would see people who were single and think, oh my goodness, like I feel so sorry for them. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, it's the best kept secret being single. I actually love being single. I think it's just being comfortable with myself, being happy, being single has been wonderful. I did go into a relationship. I did not know all of the things about love bombing and what a covert narcissist was. And so I ended up in a really unhealthy relationship and had to get out of that. It was 20 months and it was really hard. And so I wish there were a show like yours who I could have like gone to and learned all of those things. But that's what happened. And so I really took some time after that I'm about 6 months out from that, and just really getting to the place of like, you know what, I'm happy if I never date again. Like I'm so happy with me and where I'm at. So that's kind of where I landed.
I'd like to piggyback for a second and say that I was really happy single also. And I think that's really important after you go through something hard, even if it's not loss, even if it's like a big breakup or a difficult relationship, getting to the point where you're happy alone. That is the most important thing.
I think if you're an older widow, like, I mean, I'm not old, but I'm 45 and we were raised in that generation where we watched our parents be married and then we got married young and we really never spent any time single. And we look at it as a negative thing to be single. And I know this is a show about dating, but I really, for those of you who are widowed, who are listening to this, understand you do not have to run out and get married. You do not. You are a whole person. You do not need somebody else to do those things for you. And a lot of times what we see, and I have a lot of experience, I live in a small community where there are a lot of people who are older and they lose their spouses. And you see people who get married for the wrong reasons. They need a guy to mow their lawn and they need this and that. And then they end up very unhappy. And so I think that Megan and I have talked about this before of like making a list, like, why is it that you want to be in a relationship? Because it's very common for widowers to remarry. It is not common for widows to remarry over the age of 45. So these men are looking for someone to do their laundry and do their dishes and all of that stuff. And women, I think, are looking for like, I'm done with that phase of my life. And so they're finding themselves very happy. So if, really evaluate that. I would encourage you, if you're listening to this and you're a widow, what phase? You're at a different phase in life. Like if you want to go on trips, you can go with your girlfriends. Like you can join groups and stuff like that. So just take some time, because it does feel really awkward when you've been married for so many years and all of a sudden your partner is gone. You have to get really comfortable being alone. And so that would be my, like, what I think would, you know, be a big thing that I wish somebody had told me.
So when you talk about getting really comfortable alone, I think that's great advice for anybody out there, whether you've experienced a loss or whether you are single and stepping into the dating world. Can you guys think of when you went through that experience, and you both talk about the fact that you got comfortable alone, what steps did you take, or how did you get comfortable doing things alone after you have had somebody by your side to do those things with for so long?
Well, I'm an introvert, so it was really easy for me to to be comfortable alone and in my house. And it was less about going out and doing things and, like going to the movies alone or eating, excuse me, eating a meal alone. And it was more about having control over my life, not needing somebody to help me with uh handy work around the house, or that needing that person to like split the chores. It was like more about getting into a routine where I was doing my life, I was happy in it, I was able to handle everything that came at me alone, including, I was, raising my son, and anything that like broke in my house, I tried to figure out how to fix it. So I became kind of handy because my husband was really handy. So I leaned on him a lot for that. So, but then he was gone. So I was like, well, I guess I've got to figure out how to do plumbing and how to build whatever and what kind of weed spray I need for the yard. And so for me, it was more things like that, feeling comfortable and confident, knowing that I was doing my life with confidence, like I said.
For me, it was a thing of trusting myself that my gut was right. I had a husband who was just amazing, like a very, I don't know, a lot of wisdom. His gut, he could tell things like 2 years out. And so I didn't have to practice that in my life because I had him to lean on for that. And so it was one of the first things with my counselors that I said is, hey, I want to learn to trust my gut. I want to learn to trust my instincts. And that has been a process of this, but that's really the thing that was missing for me that I've learned. And like Megan is talking about, learning to fix things. Like this morning I was making cookies and my KitchenAid mixer was like all wonky and stuff. And I just was like, I mean, I could break it. I just flipped it open, grabbed a flathead screwdriver and was like, I'm going to fix this puppy. So I did make sure to unplug it, but I fixed it and it doesn't wobble anymore. And so it's just doing those little things to the point where you get comfortable of like, hey, I can do these really hard things and I'm very capable. So that was, yeah, for me.
So once you kind of started dating, how do you broach this topic? Because I'm assuming at some point in some of your dating, past relationships always come up. Was that something that maybe you had to learn to be able to talk about before you start dating, being able to say, yes, my husband passed away, without it kind of bringing you right back maybe to that moment? So how do you deal with talking about this really kind of big, sensitive topic when you're meeting with somebody new?
That's part of feeling ready. You have to be able to talk about it. You have to be able to function without it just fully breaking you, and that's just part of wading through it and healing and growing. And then when you meet somebody, you almost have to kind of demand that you are still allowed to talk about it, that it's not going to be awkward for them, because a partner dying is different than a breakup. Talking about your ex is maybe not always like the best in a relationship, right? But talking about a partner who died, especially if that person impacted your kids or stepkids or whatever, keeping their memory alive is really important. And so you have to kind of stand your ground there if it comes up, and be able to articulate why that's important to you. And if it's a problem with that person, get through it, figure it out. It's not been a problem ever for me. My boyfriend and I knew each other already. So he saw me go through it. He saw me share about it on, social media. And so it wasn't like a new topic that I had to bring up in that case. But it is important that you are allowed to talk about that person.
Mhm. I agree. I think it's for me, I dated a widower. And so in the beginning, it appeared that it was okay, but later on, it became an issue because I could tell he was jealous. It was not a healthy relationship, and so it became very uncomfortable topic. So I think in any relationship, that's going to be true, that you're going to be watching for how they react to anything that you say. But I thought dating a widower, just as a side note, would be an easy thing. Like, oh, they're going to get it and all of this. But that doesn't mean just because they're a widower that that's just, a shoo-in, that it's all going to magically happen. So for me, I am very comfortable because I think even when I see people that I know, I talk about my husband just like no big deal. I think it just should be a, common thing that we do. And so that's what I would say. Like if you're comfortable with it, watch their reaction and see if they are comfortable with it. But and it's just kind of a given in my life. There are just things that I talk about and it's no big deal. So I think if you're comfortable, they'll be comfortable, hopefully.
So we recently talked about my husband. I planted his ashes in a tree, and then the tree died, and then I planted another tree and that one died, and 3 times this tree has died. It's just not meant to happen, right? And so we were talking about that, and we were at Home Depot the other day getting something unrelated, and my boyfriend pointed out they had a Japanese maple tree, and he was like, hey, that you want to go for a 4th time. And so it's just little things like that he's supportive of,
Mhm.
Remembering somebody who's passed. It's not a jealous thing. It's support.
Mhm. Watch for that. If you're seeing jealousy, that's not going to be a healthy thing, because you want to be able to have, like Megan saying, memorials and that person to understand. For me, there's literally a quarter of the year where it's our birthdays and then anniversaries and then the death of his death. And so I've got 3 months that I'm very, triggered, even though you don't consciously remember. Your body and your brain, your subconscious is remembering this. And so I have, would have hard seasons. And if your partner isn't getting that, it can be really challenging. So, make sure you're with somebody who they're not jealous when you talk about your late spouse.
Does this really change how you view relationships going forward? I mean, it sounds like you both had loving, wonderful relationships and marriages before. So did that, in its good way, bad way, kind of however it is, it colors obviously how you view future relationships, but to lose people so suddenly and to be kind of like thrust back into this thing where it's, oh, I get this, is this dating now? So did it change how you really view going into new relationships now?
I think because I had a great relationship with my husband, that it set the tone for believing that there were other good relationships out there. So I haven't lost hope that there are other people out there that I could be a partner with. But it definitely set the tone. And yeah, I have hope for a great relationship. Somebody asked me, they said, do you believe that you just get one great love in your life? And I said, no, I don't believe that. I believe like you can have a part 2. I believe that living a good life honors my husband. Having other relationships says that like I had a good relationship and that I know those are out there and I want that again. And so, yeah, I think it did set the tone for it.
I love that. I love that you said that you believe in having a part 2. I think so too. And I think for me, it made when Jason died, it made me appreciate life even more. So I was like, I'm absolutely not going to settle. I'm not going to date just to date. I want to live my life and be happy in my life. And if that means somebody is in my life with me, fantastic. And if it means that I'm alone forever, fantastic. I want to live a happy life because we're not guaranteed the next minute, you know?
Mhm.
And that's what it really taught me.
Yes. I went through an intersection the other day and I paused and someone was in the car with me and I didn't go through the intersection and an RV came through the intersection. And it was another reminder that
They
our
ran
lives
the
can be
light.
over. They ran the light and I would have been dead, you guys. And so it is a constant reminder, like we live life very different. We realize that tomorrow is not promised and
Mhm.
that all of the things in my situation, my husband was just a wonderful provider. And we didn't go on all the vacations and the adventures and the trips that I would have liked to have gone to because he was waiting for retirement. And so now I live every day like this could be my last day. And so I'm going to go and do all of those fun things. And so, yes, it does color, how we live our lives.
Yeah.
So when you think about the fact that you're living every day, stepping into those relationships, we're talking about kind of the dating experiences that you've had now. A lot of our listeners are just getting into dating and can find a lot of advice in what you're saying. But what steps did you guys take to start dating? Were you on websites? Were you meeting people in real life? Like what steps and how did you go about that?
So I've been on dating sites and apps before. It's actually how I met my husband, Jason. So I did all of that earlier. So I've done it. But I actually met my current boyfriend. We dated right before I met Jason briefly. And so, we stayed connected and like on social media, and then he, slid into my DMs. That's actually how Christina and I became friends too. She slid into my DMs. So Instagram is really connecting me with some super important people in my life. But so I didn't really have a lot of that. It was just living my life authentically and happily and sharing that, showing that other people could see that I was happy. And that
Mhm.
doesn't mean you have to post everything that you do. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking people in your real life seeing you authentically living and doing things and accomplishing stuff and reaching goals and things like that. People seeing that kind of makes you magnetic. People gravitate toward that. And so it's a way to find friends, find your people, maybe find another partner, maybe not. It doesn't matter because you are living your life happily regardless.
Mhm. I wholeheartedly agree. So I was living my best life when I met the previous person that I dated. Fast forward to this year, and I was like, okay, I'm going into a new year. I adopt a new hobby every year, like a new skill that I want to learn. One year it was learning ukulele, another year it was to learn how to crochet. So I do this every year. And this year I made my list of what I wanted to do, and I wanted to get a puppy and learn to play pickleball and learn to do quilting. And lo and behold, I start playing pickleball and I'm having a blast and I'm living my best life. And honestly, ladies, I seriously was like, I will die single. I don't care. I don't need a man in my life. I don't.
I can vouch for that. She said that.
Yeah, I 100% was living my best life. And I think that is the way that you end up finding people on accident, is because you're out there being your most authentic self, as Megan said, and you're having a life. And I met someone, and only recently have we started to see where things go. But you don't reek of desperation. You're happy. And so I think that was the step that I took, was just going out. Like I didn't expect to meet somebody. I just was like, I will die alone before I ever like go through what I went through again. And so yeah, that's the step that I took, is just getting a life.
Well, I'm glad you said that, Christina, because we've talked about that in a couple of our episodes of being like, yes, online dating is fine. I met my current boyfriend that way, but there is also a life that you can be creating and living, and you don't know
Yes.
who who you'll happen across. We interviewed one of my good friends last season, and she goes into every personal interaction with me like, who's going to be my new best friend? And so she just comes at it with this attitude of like, I'm just going to see who I meet. If it turns into something, that could be really awesome.
Mhm.
But it's not going to be the end of the world if it just turns out I had 5 minutes in the target line and somebody left with a smile. So it's wonderful to hear the fact that creating and building a life that you find interesting and joyful and fun can lead to things. And again, if it doesn't, you're still creating this life that's fun. So
Yeah.
Right. There's no lose.
Right.
Well, and we have talked about sit down and make like, these are all of the hobbies. These are all of the things I like to do. And what happens is, like, if you think about it, if you're meeting somebody, you don't want them to be playing like softball and your thing that you do is play pickleball. Like, if you are doing that thing and you're meeting people in those same communities, there's going to be that overlap, those commonalities. So I think that's also, something to consider.
So did you get a lot of pushback or kind of side glances from like friends and family when you decide, hey, I think I'm ready to start dating again? Because you had talked about being kind of ready and there's no real timeline. So I think friends and family can't necessarily see what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So it may feel fast for them, but you're like, hey, we've been slogging through it for a good year and a half.
Yes.
You haven't seen what we've been dealing with. So can you talk maybe a little to how friends and family kind of started to react when you're like, I think I'm ready to start dating?
Christina, did you want to go first?
Okay, I will go first. I don't know. I would say that with friends and family, I broke it to them slowly. Wow. I know you guys can edit this. Are you guys wanting us to talk about what we tell people or what we experienced? Because I think
whatever you feel comfortable with.
I think our listeners would like either and both. So if you're comfortable with sharing both sides of it, feel free. If you're only comfortable with sharing one side of it, whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay. We're really big about sharing with people that to be supportive. If a family member has gone through this, just like what you shared, is that they don't know everything that you've gone through. They don't know what it's like to go and out and you're alone and you're seeing other couples and you miss having that. So for family to be sensitive and also not to create a gap in the family, to be supportive, because what happens is if you've had teenagers, I've had teenagers, I have adult children, if you say, oh, don't date this person, or what are you doing? And you react and have this overreaction, what happens is that pulls you away, and it actually feels like, pulls you away from family, but then it brings you closer to that person. And it's almost like you're like really close to this person. And it can create an unhealthy situation with a teenager. And so I really wanted with my family to say, hey, I need you to be supportive because I don't want to be fighting you and missing red flags. And so, think of it that way, encourage your family and just have a really open communication with them about, hey, this is new for me. I know it's new for you. You've got kids who are watching their mom or dad date again. And that's causes a lot of feelings. It's a lot. So just to have open communication in that, I think is really important.
Yeah, I think that's important too. And I didn't really have any pushback from my family, but I also think that they know that I wouldn't have listened. So I think that that's part of it. But I also have a young son. I mean, he was, I think, maybe 8 when I started dating. And I wanted to be sure that was, not going to be a problem with him. We took it really slow. And it was also, pandemic times. So we did a lot of like video virtual dates. We called them digidates, and we'd like watch a show together or something. And it was months of that before I even considered talking about it with my son and letting my son in on some of those conversations, like letting him pop into the video sometimes and, things like that. So I think it's important to have that open dialogue, but also like Christina said, if you're fighting with your family about it, you might be missing red flags. If you might be missing problems because you're just bonding to that person. So I just think it's so important to just know that you're ready, to be confident with yourself. You know you're ready. And even if your family is not supportive yet, you still love them. You know that they'll come around and you can still confidently move forward with or without that person, but you still have your head on your shoulders to be able to make those solid judgments.
Yes.
I want to dig a little bit deeper. You guys both mentioned having kids going through this and talking about extended family and kids. So how were you able to, and what did you do to support your children when you started dating again, understanding that they're also going to have big emotions that are very different and that they might be at a different stage in the grieving process than you guys were?
So my kid situation is a little bit complicated because Jason had 4 kids. So I had stepkids that I still keep in touch with, but certainly not with the same amount of regularity as I did when we were together, and so it was them that I was the most careful with. I see my son every single day. And he's also from a previous marriage. Jason was not his dad. So I see him every day. I can gauge his feelings. I know, how to approach topics. It was no question in my mind that I could gauge how he was feeling about it, but it was the other kids that I actually reached out to their mom first, just to say, hey, like, what's the temperature here? I don't want them to see on social media or anything before I tell them that I'm dating somebody else. I want to be sure that they know that I haven't forgotten their dad, that they can always still talk to me about him. And, so I just reached out to their moms and had that conversation. And then, or their mom, and then some of the kids were old enough that I could just talk to them about it. But and then with my son, it was just communicating, just talking about it. It's that's big in our house, is talking about things, talking about feelings, making sure that we're okay with stuff and saying what we're feeling. That's a big thing we're trying to work on, is just really strong communication and talking things through. So
My kids are both adults, as I mentioned, and my son is the youngest, and he was in college when I started dating. So he was away at college. And so I had a few months before he met my son. And my son's very easygoing, so that was pretty simple. My daughter, on the other hand, is very strong-willed, very opinionated, and she lives in Texas and I live in Oregon, and so she had a lot to say, and it was very, yeah, she was not as just like easily to jump on board and be supportive, and she is 28. So, this was a few years ago, and I appreciated her feedback because later when I looked back, she was used to dating. She has a lot of friends who are dating, and so she knows what's going on. I am 47 at this point, and I am not used to, I'm old school. Like, you met someone, you got married. This wasn't like the internet and all of this didn't exist. And so I appreciated my daughter's feedback. And especially later when I looked back and I was like, man, she was right. So I think with kids, also listening to them and the communication, I have very intentionally, as my kids have grown up, cultivated relationships with them. And I did appreciate their feedback, and they were supportive. And also, I think one thing I would add is that when I broke up with the person I was in a relationship with, one of the things that I didn't consider, and maybe if you are somebody out there dating, is that my son didn't get to say goodbye. And so I think, like, it's also the thing of, like, you're bringing kids into a relationship and he didn't know what was going on. And so that is an interesting piece of it, is something that I wish I would have recognized is that, once they meet them, that person, if they leave, didn't, even though he was 25, they have a relationship too with that person. So, yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah.
That was a very good point, and actually something that I'm in a long-term relationship with no plans to go anywhere, but my son lives in a completely different state. And I've been together with my current partner for long enough that is something that is probably that I should consider if things should ever change in the future. So I wouldn't have thought about that. So I think that's very insightful. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So on the topic of giving and receiving advice, what advice do you wish you had been given, or if you could have talked to somebody else that had gone through the same thing and was starting dating, is there any advice that you wish you would have been given before you started?
I wish that I could scream from the rooftops to every widow or widower out there about red flags and dating. I wish that I had understood what the red flags were. I had no idea. I'd heard the term red flags, but I never looked it up. And yeah, I wish I could sit every single widow and widower down and say, read on this topic, because you don't realize what is happening when red flags, when somebody is, a narcissist and they're pulling you in very quickly and they're telling you all of these things and things are happening rapidly and this person is mirroring you and you get sucked into a relationship. And I've seen it now that I understand what it is. I can see it everywhere. And I hear it from a lot of widowers that this has happened to them. And it's very scary, and people will take advantage of you financially. And so that is the one thing. If you're listening to this and you have lost your spouse, please sit down. I guess even if you haven't lost your spouse, sit down, look on the internet and see what red flags are, what they look like. And I also would suggest watching the movie Dirty John on Netflix if you can, and to get a visual of what happens in real life when somebody sucks you in quickly. So that's what I wish I would have known.
I think I would have benefited from, that was great. That's fantastic advice. And I agree with that too. I have not had the same experience as Christina. My boyfriend's fantastic. And
he is.
And but I think what I would have benefited from is another widow, somebody that has done this before, further along, just telling me it's okay. It's okay to be alone. Just that validation, that confidence boost of like a mentor, almost somebody who has been there before, saying, hey, this is going to suck for a while. It's okay to stay where you are. It's okay to date. It's okay to not date. Do you want to date women? That's fine too. Like, just everything is okay. I would have really benefited from just somebody validating what I was going through.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Definitely. I think for me, like one part that was really helpful for me in dating was my sister saying to me, you don't have to get married. And I was like, what? Like, I come from a generation and a faith background where that was what it was ingrained into my head, was that, you date somebody and you marry somebody. And my sister saying that to me was really like, oh, relief. Like, I don't have to find a partner. And even if I did find a partner, I don't have to marry them. And so that is another thing that I wish, having that mentor. And my sister isn't widowed, but having that mentor in my life, yes, would have been helpful. And my community, by the way, has cheered me on. They have been so supportive and I love them. I live in a small community, and as a widow, it is scary to get out there and date. You're like, are people going to judge you? And I will be honest and say that I even now will see widows that I know and they start dating after a while, and I'm like, have they grieved long enough? And then you're like, oh my goodness, this isn't what I know better. So we all do it. If you've done it, no big deal. Like, just forgive yourself, but be supportive. If you see a widow or widower out there and they're starting to date, be supportive, because it is so hard. And so, I agree with you. I wish I would have had a mentor.
Well, I think it's really, because we have talked some on our podcast too about, being interesting in your own life. And so hearing you, both of you, kind of really hammer home this idea of single is not bad. Yes, we are a dating and relationship podcast, but that is still something that we've always espoused as well, is that you don't make a good partner if you're not a good to yourself and have created that security and that calm and whatever confidence, and just like, yeah, if you're going to add to my life, I will happily welcome you in with open arms. But I, like you said, I am done being your mom. I'm not going to be your babysitter. I'm not picking up after you. You have to bring in some value to this new chapter of my life. Otherwise, again, I'm perfectly happy on my own. I'm figuring it all out.
Yes. And that is very difficult for men. If you guys have not talked about that, that is a difficult thing. It seems to be that if you don't need them, that can be challenging for them. When I walk in and it's like, I don't need you in my life, I want you in my life. And so that can be very shocking to people. So yes, very much. If you're not adding value, like, yeah,
you're not welcome.
Move.
That's what we
you're
say.
not welcome. I love that so much. Yes.
Did you find any like surprises about yourself in this like next chapter of dating? Have you learned anything new or interesting about who you guys are as a person, as you kind of done these different chapters and you step into this new chapter as widow and starting to date again? Did you learn anything new about you and yourself?
I think so. I'm such a different person now. And that's part of that is just growth, just getting older, aging. But part of it is learning about myself going through that loss. I've always been kind of a calm, chill person, but I'm even more so now. I'm more patient. I don't sweat the small stuff, because it's not worth it. I don't want to spend my time angry at the person that I've chosen to spend my life with or spend my time with. I'm just not going to sit in those emotions. So I do what I can to, when in any relationship you get annoyed. There's little things here and there that you're just like, why are you doing it that way? Come on. And that's true for everybody. And I just try so hard not to dwell on it and to, if something is bothering me, to talk about it, to bring it up and be like, hey, this isn't working for me. Let's work through it, because it's not worth your time to be mad. If you are not happy in a relationship, why are you in the relationship? And that's the lesson that I've learned is I don't want to be mad. I don't want to be sad. I want to be happy. I want to have fun. So let's figure out how to do that.
I agree. I am really big about protecting my peace. And prior to my husband dying, I didn't have the best boundaries. Like I didn't understand about, protecting my peace. And if my nervous system was dysregulated, I didn't understand that was my body telling me something is wrong here, if it were work relationships or relationships in the community. And so now I try to stay very in tune with myself of like somebody dysregulating my nervous system is like my warning sign to exit stage right. It's just, this is not like, it's not that person's fault. Like we're just going to move along here. And so that's been a really huge thing for me, is because recognizing that our lives are short. And I think when you're younger, you just automatically think that this life is never ending. But when you find your spouse and they're just gone in an instant, it really changes the way that you view life. And so it's like, nope, if this is not, bringing me joy, like I'm moving along. And so that is one big way that my life has changed, is I have a lot better boundaries with people. I just don't allow those things into my life anymore, where previously I would have just sucked it up and been like, okay, I have to deal with this person. And so not anymore. So I would say that's the biggest thing that's changed about me.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just not allowing that into your life anymore.
Well, I think what other, I guess, kind of to round it out here, what other tips, advice, or parts of your story do you think would be important to maybe share with our listeners or share with others? What do you think would be the most important things to put out there? What else would you like to share?
We really like to talk about bringing your whole ass self into a relationship rather than just part of yourself. Like, you need to be a whole person, and somebody coming in needs to be a whole person. And, I mentioned it earlier, do not go out and find somebody because you need your lawn mowed or you need somebody to clean out the gutters. That is a terrible reason to get into a relationship.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of people that maybe they're younger and they have young children, and it's maybe a good partnership that made sense. But when you are, younger widows like we are, but still, like Meghan has a son, I was in a different life phase. Sit down and think about, you're in a different life phase now. And what do you want? So previously, my husband and I were raising children together. Our children were adults. We were getting ready to go into a retirement. Now, what am I looking for? I'm not looking for somebody who has children. I am looking for somebody to go on adventures with me. I'm looking for a companion. I'm looking for a partner. So it's a different phase in life. So those are things to consider at this stage is, again, bringing your whole ass self in, and what is it that you actually need in this stage of your life? Because that's not what you needed previously. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, I think so too. Just being a full, well-rounded, happy person,
Mhm.
getting into a relationship with another well-rounded, happy person. I really hate the
Mhm.
phrase my other half or my better half, because you're not two halves of a whole. You are
Exactly.
individuals,
Mhm.
And that was a big part of, why I was like, no, I can fix a toilet. I can clean my gutters. I can build a fence. I can fix my pool equipment. I can do all of this. I don't need another person to do it. I can, if it comes down to it, I can Google plumbers near me and call one and pay them to come out. I don't need a man to handle
Mhm.
this for me,
Mhm.
I think that's really important when you're considering dating. And then I also, I think it's important to be safe.
Mhm.
There's a lot of creeps out there, and we've talked before about, is it okay if I share that we also have a podcast at this point?
Yes, please go
That was
ahead.
actually my next
Okay.
question was, how can our listeners find more of you? So yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool. So we have a podcast called the Full Cup Club podcast, and it's mostly about getting back up after you've been knocked down. So, powering through, moving forward. And we did a series of a few episodes about dating. So one of those episodes is safety in dating. And we offered a lot of tips and tricks and ideas to be safe when you're out there, especially if you're online dating and you're meeting somebody you don't know. Google it. You don't even have to come listen to our podcast. You can Google how
Yeah.
to be safe when you're online
Mhm.
dating. It's so
Mhm.
important. There's there's so many articles and lists and everything out there. So be safe and then enter into a relationship as a whole person.
Mhm. Yes, and like Megan said, she was used to online dating. She had previously online dated when she met her husband. I had not dated online. I had none of that experience. I knew nothing. So if you are a widow or widower listening to this, please do your research, because there are some sketchy people out there, and there are some scary situations, and you need to be educated walking into dating. And so I would highly encourage, like Megan said, you don't need to come listen to our podcast. Do your research and be safe out there.
Because the landscape is different.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, especially if you've had a partner that you could trust. And I am a very trusting person. I am very naive. And I just trust people. And so I take what they say, as the truth, like, oh, this is who you are. And so if you're that person, you can easily get sucked in and people take advantage of you. I went through in a very emotionally abusive situation after in this last relationship, and financially abused. And so that's why I would encourage people, go and do your research and learn, talk to people, listen to podcasts, read books, do your research before you hop out there, because it is a very different landscape, as you were saying, than in 1995, if you are my age, but especially older than I am, widows and widowers. My mother-in-law said one time to me, and it was before I lost my husband. She said, there are worse things than being alone. And ladies, I can tell you, there are worse things, far worse things than being alone. So please remember that I have watched people who have quickly gotten into relationships and spent the rest of their lives being miserable because they jumped into something and didn't know. And for them, they experienced the things that are worse than being alone.
Well, it's not to say that you can't try and see the good in people. It's never about that, but it's about being aware.
Yes.
About having the smarts and the know-how to be like, something isn't sitting right. Is this just because I'm nervous, or is this something I need to listen to my gut a little bit more? Like Christina, you were talking about, because we talk about this a lot, is tapping into that gut instinct and being like, you may walk into that coffee shop and you get this off feeling, and you are perfectly within your rights to turn right back around and walk out. You don't owe them an explanation for anything. So I love that you talked about safety, because you're coming off of a really big emotional thing, and to protect, like you said, Christina, your peace at all costs. So you talked a little bit about your podcast. Where else can people find you if they want to know more?
So we're on Instagram and Facebook at Full Cup Club Podcast in both places. And then you can listen to our podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. So Apple, Spotify, Amazon, just wherever. And it's the Full Cup Club Podcast.
Perfect. Well, thank you, ladies, for joining us, for talking about this. Like I said, it was a listener suggestion. We've had a couple of people mention it. So thank you for being open and honest and giving such great advice and information to our listeners. We really appreciate that.
Thank you so much for having us. Yeah, thank you.
And if any of you listeners out there have other topics or other guests that you would like to see us bring on, please feel free to email us at soyou'readytodate@gmail.com, and we will talk to you all next week.